Welcome to Two Rivers Water Reclamation Authority. Except for the 32 people who come in here every day, this is the most important people we've had since Cahill came in 58 years ago. We provide the sewage treatment for 130,000 people, from Red Bank to West Long Branch, Titten Falls to Rumson, and all 12 towns in between. Any toilet flushed in those areas or shower taken, we take that water, get it clean, and get it to the ocean where it's much cleaner than the ocean and 3 times cleaner than we're required to be. We treat 4.4 billion gallons of sewage a year. We have 200 miles of pipeline that we maintain. We're going to talk a little bit about one of those pipelines. I do want to give one public service announcement today, and that is please don't dump your bacon grease down the drain. We remove 1.2 million pounds of bacon grease from the sewage system every year, so we got to get it back out. Just keep it out. We also remove 120 tons of wipes, baby wipes and so forth. We remove 2,500 tons of sludge that would otherwise get into the environment. We're here to talk about a project. The project is our main pump station. You saw it when you drove in. It's a small building, but it goes 25 feet below grade. During Superstorm Sandy, the storm surge cracked our 25-foot deep, 2-foot thick concrete wall and made it irreparable. And we're here to replace that pump station with a new one out in the outfield of our ball field. In addition, we've got a 55-year-old pipeline that comes from Oceanport underneath Pleasure Bay, the Shrewsbury River, to here in Monmouth Beach. That settled originally in 1968 and continues to settle, and we have corrosion on the inside. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but if that pipeline fails, it takes about 3 months to put a bypass in. That would allow about 800 million gallons of sewage to get into the river before we have a chance to replace it. That being said, we have a team of Hazen and Sawyer, PS&S, and French and Perillo working to design and replace that pump station and treatment plant. It will include a 100-foot deep hole that we're going to dig, 100-foot diameter, 100-foot deep in the outfield. We're digging down, dropping a tunnel boring machine in, and tunneling to Oceanport. We'll put in that an 8-foot diameter pipe with a 54-inch fiberglass pipe, and that fiberglass pipe has a 100-year warranty, so we're going to last a lot more than 55 years this next time. Schiavone Construction will start digging that hole sometime near the end of this summer and should be done in May of 2026. The project's critical for the environment, will create local jobs, and will enable us to continue to provide reliable service to all of our future and current customers. So I want to thank the TRWRA board, the municipal mayors, for their foresight to see the need for this project. I want to thank the legislators, both state and federal, for finding a way to make this work. And I want to thank Governor Murphy for his help to get this grant that should lessen the impact on our ratepayers. So with that, Governor Murphy, thank you for coming out and thank you for your help.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everybody. You talk about a day that the Lord has made. This is stunningly beautiful. Mike, thank you so much for that introduction, your gracious words, your leadership. It's good to be with you, your son, Brian, who I just met, and your brother, Greg, who's the great governor of the state of Montana, is another friend of mine. I want to acknowledge some of the folks who are with us today, and I'll probably miss some folks in addition to your colleagues and board members who I want to acknowledge. We wouldn't be here today without our federal partners, and you'll hear from each of them in a moment, Senator Bob Menendez and Congressman Frank Pallone. I want to thank you guys in particular for helping us out. Mike mentioned state legislators. There's none better than Senator Vin Gopal. Vin, great to have you with us today as well. Several of our local mayors, Monmouth Beach Mayor Dave Stickle, Little Silver Mayor Bob Neff, Oceanport Mayor John Coffey, the other leaders. I also bring greetings from Commissioner Director Tom Arnone in Monmouth County, who wanted to be here today and could not. And we also have rounding out the group today, and I'm sure there are others, our very own DEP Commissioner, Sean LaTourette. Sean, great to be with you. From FEMA Region 2, Administrator Dave Warrington and his colleagues. Dave, great to be with you as always. And State Police Lieutenant Colonel Chris DeMays is with us as well. Chris, great to have you. So, just to reiterate, Mike has done a very good job of framing this. I'll put some of this at the risk of repeating what he said in my own words. I'm still getting over the bacon grease. If you'll forgive me for being a little bit off kilter, that's a staggering amount of bacon grease, and I love bacon. So why are we here? As Mike said today, we're proud to announce the state will provide $20 million toward the Two Rivers Water Reclamation Authority's efforts to protect the system against future storms and replace outdated infrastructure. For those of you doing the math at home, the state's pitching in nearly a quarter of the project's total $85 million cost, and that funding is made possible thanks to FEMA grant money. And with all due respect to the state, we wouldn't be here without Dave's leadership in FEMA Region 2, and especially without Senator Menendez and Congressman Pallone's leadership for their support. We literally wouldn't be here without them. As Mike mentioned, in terms of the project itself, there are two parts. One is to replace the damaged 3,000-foot-long sewer line that runs underneath Pleasure Bay, and then separately moving a critical pump station out of a flood zone. And both of these actions will protect the infrastructure from future storms and make this system more climate resilient. I know infrastructure like sewer lines and water pumps may not seem exciting, but this is a big deal for the 90,000 people across a dozen towns and 2 military bases that rely on this system every day. The sewer line that we're replacing is not only 50-plus years old and reaching the end of its life, but again, as Mike said, was damaged during Superstorm Sandy, so there's a real risk that it could rupture. And if it did, things would get ugly fast. Millions of gallons of raw, untreated sewage would be dumped into the bay, hurting this beautiful waterfront that so many of us enjoy. And with that pipe out of commission, that could mean sewage is being sent back into people's homes, literally. So to put it mildly, that would be extremely unpleasant for those who have to deal with it. Now, as far as the pump station goes, that's critical to keeping floodwater out. However, it is located in a flood zone and could be damaged like it was during Sandy, rendering it utterly useless when it is needed the most. As the saying goes, the best time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. So we are being proactive, all of us together, in replacing this critical infrastructure now and making it more climate resilient rather than waiting until it's too late and a big storm inevitably hits. We know with climate change, it's no longer a question of if, but when that next superstorm will hit. Before I go on, I want to acknowledge my colleague, Dan Kelly, who oversees all of our emergency management activities. So 10 years ago, we saw firsthand the vulnerability of our water and sewer treatment facilities. After Sandy hit, not a single water treatment or wastewater treatment plant in the state, not one, was fully operational. As a result, an estimated 3 to 5 billion gallons of untreated wastewater entered our waterways. And I'm proud to say that our $20 million investment in Two Rivers is emblematic of the hundreds of millions that we have collectively dedicated as a state to shoring up our water treatment facilities so we don't face the same problems we did after Sandy. Again, Mike kind of alluded to this. Replacing a sewer pipe may sound like a simple thing on the surface, but the Two Rivers project is a rather large and complicated undertaking. The sewer line we're talking about today is more than a half a mile long and buried underneath Pleasure Bay. And we'll have to bury the new one almost 100 feet deeper so that it is properly protected from future storms. So there's nothing simple about this project. And anybody who's ever worked with a contractor could tell you that complicated is another word for expensive. And that's the last thing that local governments want to hear. So without this grant funding we're providing today, the TRWRA would have to borrow further to complete the project, and unfortunately that hits local ratepayers. But that's exactly why the state and the feds are stepping in to help out. Every dollar we can deploy, either from the state or federal level, is a dollar that stays in the pockets of property taxpayers and makes our communities more affordable. So we're proud, collectively, all of us, to make this investment. It's the smart thing to do. It protects critical infrastructure against climate change. It protects this ecosystem It saves local taxpayer dollars. As Mike also said, it also creates a lot of really good jobs in this project. All of the above we could use. So I'm honored to be here today. And again, we would not be here with federal money without him. Please help me welcome our outstanding senior senator, Senator Bob Menendez.
Well, thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back here in Monmouth. Let me just say that I'm thrilled to have a governor who has made Superstorm Sandy recovery and resilience a central part of his agenda. This isn't our first Sandy-related event. We shared many podiums and fought hard for Sandy families in places like Union Beach and Lavallette and Port Monmouth, just to mention some. And I'm grateful for your leadership to help restore, recover, and rebuild from the lingering effects of the storm. I'm also thrilled to be here with my colleague from the United States Congress, New Jersey's 6th Congressional District, Congressman Frank Pallone. When New Jersey faced its darkest moments, we had some of the brightest lights fighting on behalf of our state. And believe me, if you're ever in a legislative fight in Washington, you want someone who is a fierce champion for the people he represents in Frank Pallone. We did it together, and Frank, thank you so much for your leadership in this and so much more. And I also want to recognize Senator Gopal, who is an extraordinary public servant, a native son of Monmouth County down the road in Neptune Township. And his advocacy and leadership on this issue is incredibly poignant and essential. So thank you. And lastly, your executive director and all of the members of the authority who make this running successfully all the time and who will build a successful project for the next several generations of residents. We're here today to launch the main pump station project, which has been said has been administered by Two Rivers Water Reclamation Authority. It's a vital project that safeguards the surrounding waters, an important section of a world-famous Jersey shore for millions of gallons of sewerage. By moving the pump station, we're doing two things at once. We're both upgrading an outdated systems for the residents who call Monmouth County home, and we're looking ahead to the undeniable reality of rising seas, stronger storms, and the risk of future floods. With one project, we're bringing the main pump station out of the past, where it's faithfully served for 50 years, and we're bringing it into the future so it can serve for the next 50 years and 50 years after that. The bottom line is this pump station plays a critical role in the water treatment for 6 member towns, 6 customer towns, 2 military bases that fall under the Two Rivers purview. And if for some reason it's going down, as we've heard, 90, 100,000 New Jerseyans in the area would be affected. We simply can't let that happen. So today, and part of what Frank and I fashioned when we thought about these monies, is how do we think forward? How do we look into the future? How do we mitigate risks by learning the lessons of Superstorm Sandy? Every time I'm in Monmouth County, I can't help but remember that fateful day nearly 11 years ago when the state had the worst natural disaster in its history. The numbers only tell us half the story. $36 billion in damage, 2.6 million residents without power, and most tragically, dozens of deaths, including many in New Jersey. But underlying these statistics is only half of the story. It's summed up in 2 words that we heard up and down the Garden State. After the rain stopped, and the flood waters receded and the sun came out. Jersey strong, which is the way that neighbor helped neighbor in the days and weeks and months after the storm. The cleanup efforts, the relief efforts we brought to bear. And Jersey strong is the words of the older gentleman who I met when we were touring damage in Atlantic City. Half of his house had been washed away. It was completely open. It looked like a dollhouse. He was sitting inside of it. I went up to him and asked him, "How are you doing?" And he said, "I'm fine. How are you doing?" In that one sentence, we find the essence of Jersey strong, of what makes this state so great. It's the reason that we've pushed so hard when the odds were against us. When we needed federal relief after the storm, you remember that fight, Frank, Some of our colleagues had the audacity to say, no, we don't think you need it. Members from states like Kentucky and Texas and Florida, where we have often voted to ultimately assure that they would have the responses to storms, because, after all, this is the United States of America, we always cast our votes for them. But when it came time for us, it was a little difficult. So, anyhow, when it comes to the well-being of New Jerseyans, we never back down from a fight. And we ultimately passed $50 billion to help our state rebuild. And later on, when homeowners were systematically being lowballed for their Sandy claims, we pushed FEMA and the insurance companies to reopen every single claim and decide them fairly. As a result, we secured more than $260 million, $260 million in payments that residents were entitled to but originally deprived of. It's an effort, particularly on Sandy relief clawbacks, that we're still working on today to make sure that everybody gets back in their home and no one loses it because they can't afford it. It's about making sure that we protect the next generation from the possibilities of what used to be a every 100-year storm, but right now becomes far more frequent. So as we think about this federal investment with the governor's direction of $20 million, it's fitting that we have every level of government here, because that's what it takes to ultimately achieve success. And to me, we won't stop fighting until we make sure that every aspect of Sandy recovery becomes a reality, and that it is only a moment of the past with a brighter future tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Senator, well said, and I've lost track of the amount of times we've been together. Frank's been with us almost every single one of those times, still digging out from Sandy all these years later, so thank you for your leadership. I meant to say earlier, I will admit I missed the dress code memo for this meeting, so I apologize. Senator Menendez pointed that out privately to me, and I have to acknowledge he's right and I'm wrong. So, particularly on a Monday morning, I'm not sure what I was thinking. Both the senator and I have mentioned him. I don't know where we'd be without his leadership. Please help me welcome Monmouth County's own Congressman Frank Pallone.
Thank you, Governor. And I do have to mention some of the people that have already been mentioned, only because they've been so much involved with this. First, I have to say, with regard to the governor, he mentioned climate resilience. And the fact of the matter is, we've talked about Sandy, but we know that things are getting worse in terms of more severe storms, droughts, wildfires. I see our DEP commissioner here today. And probably no one has, if you look at an example of a state that has really addressed the climate crisis in an effective way, not only now but in the future, New Jersey is the best example, and of course the governor, our Governor Murphy, is the best example. And I'm not, I'm just not saying this to be nice. I mean, when I'm down in Washington, everybody talks about New Jersey and your leadership on the climate issue, which is really ultimately the problem that we face here when we talk about Sandy and future storms. And the other thing you should know, and Senator Menendez mentioned it, is this is federal dollars, but it's directed by the governor. So understand that if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be getting it here at this sewage treatment plant. And I have to say, Mike, I love when I was telling Vin Gopal, I love all the analogies with sewers. I told Vin when I came here that, there was a time, maybe not so much now, when people would mainly know me because of what I did with sewers and sewer treatment. And I was always very proud of it. And people would say, well, why are you proud of that, Pallone? But it's true. I mean, it's so important. It really is. And then with regard to Senator Menendez, I don't know that many people realize that, he represents, and the governor, like 9 million people, over 9 million people in this state. But I watched him during Sandy, and even now, on an individual basis, meet with people and address their concerns, and he's still doing it. And to his credit, I've never, Bob, you heard me say, I've never seen so much personal activity by somebody like you dealing with the people that suffered during Sandy, and we're still at it with the clawbacks and so many other things. One more thing, the Lieutenant Colonel, thanks for all you do. He's going to be with us tomorrow in Washington when we have a hearing on on AM radio to make sure we keep our AM radios, and that's important during the storm too. I mean, that's the main reason that we're saying we have to have them, because if we don't have communications during a natural disaster, then we're really in trouble. So thank you for that. I better stop with all the thank yous. But I don't really have much to say, because I think a lot of it has been said about what we're doing here today. But let me just mention a few things, and I'll try to be brief. First of all, I don't want, we talk about the pump station and the sewer line and the possibility of the sewer line breaking. I was first elected, many years ago, because we had the raw sewage coming from New York. And I would constantly criticize New York and say, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And you're sending this raw sewage to New Jersey and closing our beaches. The last thing I would want would be to have to say that one of our sewer plants was doing that, right? So this is one of the reasons. We have to make sure that our sewer plants are upgraded so we don't have overflows, so we don't have breaks, so we don't have, sewage going out into our rivers and streams. So Mike, again, thank you you've been so persistent with this. I mean, he calls us all the time, and I know his brother, he probably doesn't like to mention his brother, but his brother, the governor, was actually on my committee, and he had that same willingness to work with the other side and get things done that you have. So I have to mention that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention too is that when we have these types of investments, it really is more important than ever, as I said, because of climate change, right? So we know the devastation that we had from Sandy, but the fact of the matter is, unfortunately, we have to figure that there's going to be even more in the future. So that's why it's really important to upgrade these plants for the future, to make sure that we are prepared if in the future, if there is actually another storm, which is likely to come, unfortunately. So I don't want to repeat everything. I just want to thank everybody. That everyone's very much involved. This is one of those things that involves the state, the local, and the federal government in a very effective way to get things done. So thank you again. Am I going to introduce Vin? I didn't mention Vin because I'm going to introduce him. Vin Gopal, our state senator. Talk about getting things done. We had an event the other day, a rally, and all everybody was saying was that if you want to get something done, you have to go see Vin Gopal because he's the guy to do it. So come on up. We're going to call you the master of everything.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Governor, and thank you to the incredible federal leaders, everyone being here, the mayors, the commissioners. I'm so, as someone who is born and raised in Monmouth County and now a state senator representing this incredible county, living not too far away on the other end of Long Branch here, the amount of resources and funding we have seen come into this county in the last several years, and I don't think you cover Middletown, right, Mike? So the governor's not doing this because it's Middle, but the amount of funding that has come in has been extraordinary. And if you remember some of the mayors a couple years ago, we had that big dead fish issue. I know Monmouth Beach had it. The governor stepped up, made sure funding was here to get that cleaned up. We have had a number of issues, and it's whether it's mental health, whether it's environmental protection, we've seen a real step up here from the state and federal partners to invest more in Monmouth County in the last few years than we've seen, honestly, in the last 2 decades. And the governor is term limited. He is, and I can guess, Governor, you didn't get a lot of votes in this area. He's doing this and putting funding here because this isn't about politics. It's about doing the right thing, and that's really refreshing to see that. It's really healthy to see that. That's what we need to see, not just here in New Jersey, but across the country. We should be seeing that. And to see Senator Menendez and Congressman Pallone, who 11 years later, still such an incredible focus, and the meetings they've had on Sandy, and the constituent cases that they still have in Union Beach and Seabright and Hazlet and across the shore, focused, and they have not forgotten. Unfortunately, we know we're in a 24-hour news cycle. People move on very quickly. But those unfortunate Sandy victims and Sandy families are still suffering to this day. And the commissioner, the congressman and I joked when the commissioner came in that we weren't going to bother him about the other 9 things we bothered him about last week. But he and DEP have been incredible. This is really an incredible group of folks that are working hard, and I want to end by a debt of appreciation to Mike. He is a leader statewide when it comes to sewer authorities. If there's any piece of legislation out there that has the word sewer in it, you get a text from him in 2 seconds. I don't know how he sees it, but he is this facility is blessed to have his leadership. So, Mike, thank you for all your guidance and leadership, and thank you, Governor, for doing this today.
Vin, well said as usual, and thank you for your leadership. As they say in Hollywood, it's a wrap. So, Mike, to you and your commission, your board, and your colleagues, deep thanks for hosting us today. To the senator and congressman, thank you, Senator. To all the other dignitaries, especially Dave and his FEMA colleagues, but to each and every one of you, it's a real treat to be with you today. This is a really smart, badly needed project that's going to transform lives in this whole beautiful area of our state and our country for the better. Thank you all.